Chapter 2. The importance of empirical evidence and background research. Science. Quote, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. End quote. By Nikola Tesla. As previously stated, whether we personally take biblical accounts as valuable sources of real data and facts or not, it is irrelevant. People often create stories and other myths to illustrate real-life lessons, which is practical in helping drive valuable points to those who are listening. For example, we all know of the dangers of lying or practical jokes from the story of the boy who cried wolf. It's the author's intention, however, to portray to the reader of this book to consider the Bible as a true and viable source of information. Either way, note that this is not my opinion, or maybe it is, but it is also Albert Einstein's opinion. He was quoted saying that he was more inclined toward believing in a God who reveals himself through the orderly of harmony of what exists. This I must agree with 100% as well. Romans chapter 1, verse 20 explains, quote, for his invisible qualities are clearly seen from the world's creation onward, because they are perceived by the things made. End quote. Please also note that it is not stated that there is absolutely no difference of opinion between expert references and what is being portrayed here. That would be a form of ignorance. What is merely suggested is that there is more than enough parallels of information to give credence to the observation of background research, mainly science and spirituality, and those who have absolute evidence and physical manifestations in one way or form, including people who may have what we want. The fields of spirituality, success philosophy, and observable success are points of reference that have strong foundation as observable phenomena that prove they have a basis on quantum physics or on the currently known quintessential laws of the universe. It will be strongly suggested to the reader that all three aspects are points of view or frames of mind looking at the same thing. To also prove this, the reader will be given a list of references from experts to encourage you to explore freely without bias or prejudgment. You are encouraged to come to your own conclusions and opinions. It is known that as we study and consider information, we may find that there may be fundamental contradictions, but we also realize that this is the excitement of life and variety. It is great to consider other points of view talking about the same thing so that we may be able to integrate knowledge more fully. I believe this is a form of true education. This chapter will specifically lay out the groundwork in the reader's mind that the Bible reference is a book of powerful science way ahead of its time. This will be done first by learning about the basic concepts of quantum mechanics. In the next chapters, it will be revealed that there is absolutely no way that the people described in the Bible could have known of the ideas that we are now learning through the field of quantum mechanics. But as a matter of fact, many of them were readily able to use tools to do extraordinary things that have been beyond explanation until now. Thus, it has been ignored and tossed aside as myth and nonsense. But how could people in the Bible and other so-called holy books describe experiences that only quantum mechanics is able to explain as plausible? Unless we strongly consider that spirituality originates and has been influenced by other sources outside of planet Earth, we might lose out on a huge point of reference. The Bible reference, as well as other spiritual books, describe extraordinary people doing extraordinary things under extraordinary circumstances. These are people who knew and spoke of such things as if they were common knowledge, or as a matter of fact, an absolute reality in the physical world. There were physical manifestations that were easily observed, and thus were described in terms and references that only very simple-minded persons could hope to explain. The Bible has described some as angels from heaven, demons, the sons of God, and spirits, among other descriptive terms, such as the ones who look like the sons of men. Today we may call them aliens from outer space or interdimensional beings, or even super beings from other higher vibrational dimensions? Could they all be one and the same? Just descriptions of the same thing from different points of view. The same could be said about miracles, for, in essence, they are just the result of powerful technologies that are beyond our current understanding. We will explore these ideas in the next chapters. What quantum mechanics has revealed. We will now examine a list of accepted scientific concepts that have now paved the way for new technologies and discoveries that continue to shape and improve our lives. Think now about all the technology we take for granted, the ones we readily use, such as our TVs, our smartphones, tablets, video game consoles, computers, and laptops, among others. Can you sit back and explain to yourself or another person the exact mechanics of how every technological tool works to its most essential detail? Most likely the answer is no. Yet we don't debate their reality because we see their immediate effects in our immediate lives. We see them, play with them, and interact with them. They are real physical things. But have we considered that they are the basic laws of the physical universe that we can use to apply to build these things, such as a house or a car? What about knowing or understanding the basic laws of the universe that will allow us to create our own success, whatever we choose that to be? Describing these laws is what will be our focus for the remainder of this chapter. Quote, if the genius of invention were to reveal tomorrow the secret of immortality, of eternal beauty and youth for which all humanity is aching, the same inexorable agents which prevent a mass from changing suddenly, its velocity will likewise resist the force of the new knowledge until time gradually modifies human thought. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. End quote, by Nikola Tesla. Scientific concept number 1. Everything in the universe is energy, frequency, and vibration. In school, it has been ingrained in us that everything in the universe is made out of atoms. We learn in school and through empirical evidence that everything in the universe is made up of molecules, which are made of atoms, electrons circulating around a nucleus, a collection of protons and neutrons. And that those individual particles, electrons, protons, and neutrons, are made of other smaller particles of energy. As they continue to observe, it is seen that particles become infinitely smaller. This is the process called quantization, thus the term quantum physics. It is the study of very basic components of what is known as matter. But thus far, it has been agreed on by the scientific community that the universe is made out of nothing but energy. It is unanimous. We must also consider the facts about our visible spectrum of light. It is teaching us that our visible universe is tiny in comparison to the entire electromagnetic spectrum of energy. To illustrate, the tallest building in the world is the Burj Khalifa, standing at 160 stories tall, or 2,716 feet tall. If we were to extend that building to 100 times its height to represent the entire spectrum of energy, then our present observable reality as it stands, would only allow us to live and move around on the first 6 floors. This is also considering that each floor is about 10 feet high. It is staggering to know and to realize how much energy we cannot possibly interpret with our basic senses. We need to create tools and gadgets to be able to measure the rest of the spectrum that is invisible to us. We must also strongly consider that there's even more that we can't possibly know yet. Studies about the universe are finding that the entire light spectrum only makes up less than 5% of the entire universe. Dark energy and dark matter make up more than 95% of the universe, and we almost know nothing about these concepts. To illustrate, imagine stretching a tape measure from Orlando, Florida to New York City. The tape will stretch about 1,000 115 miles. Our entire existence would be limited to only about a 6 feet span. Within those 72 inches lie our entire visible spectrum of light, including the billions of galaxies, the trillions of stars in each galaxy, and somewhere in there we exist in our tiny planet Earth. These facts aptly emphasize that there is just way too much that we don't know, and that as we continue to expand our knowledge of the workings of the universe, we realize we are only seeing a fraction of the tip of a cosmic iceberg. The ocean of energy that these facts stipulate leave no room for dogmatic attitudes and thoughts. Nobody has a monopoly on knowledge and understanding. And when we individually and collectively accept the fact that we cannot know everything in this instant, then we must become better for it, for we will always be teachable. Scientific concept 2. The double-slit experiment proves that everything in the universe exists in a paradoxical duality. Taking a step further, let's examine a widely known experiment in the field of quantum physics known as the double-slit experiment. There are many scientific documentaries done by reliable sources putting it in simple terms through visual aids. One is in the movie What the Bleep Do We Know? You are encouraged to watch not just that one, but multiple sources that explain this experiment as well, so that the concept becomes clear in your mind. These explanations will do you more good than any amount of words I may be able to put down on this page. It certainly has done the same for myself and others. Hopefully by this point, you have watched a documentary or a video explaining how the double-slit experiment is conducted. Simply put, the double-slit experiment's results and conclusion explains that particles of matter exist in a paradoxical existence. Particles of matter subsist as both particles defining time and space and as waves of energy, not relative to time and space. This is called particle-wave duality, and it is considered the foundational concept, the basics of all quantum mechanics. In essence, what we must understand is that the universe is all energy vibrating at different frequencies. To illustrate how this works, think of the visible space and all the stars and planets. The rays of the sun travel as photons in the form of waves. Research has shown that it takes 8 minutes for the light of the sun to reach the surface of the Earth. Keep in mind that the speed of light travels at 186,282 miles per second. To illustrate how fast that is, consider that the circumference of the Earth is 24,901 miles. So if you were to run in a straight line around the globe and you ran at the speed of light, by the time 1 second has passed, you already will have ran around the globe almost 8 times. We realize that the light of the sun is emitted in virtually all directions. Since the sun and all the stars in the universe are perfect spheres, then it is conclusive that their light travels in all possible directions and continues to travel unless there is resistance. We know this because we observe many stars or galaxies emitting their own collective vibrational frequency of light because it reaches us regardless of distance. Although there are many stars and galaxies we may not be able to see with our naked eyes, instrumentation helps us to see our neighboring stars and many more whose distance is unfathomable. Consider that scientists are now explaining that an infinitesimally smaller quantum observation, the atoms in the stars are emitting frequencies all over the universe. This energy is permeating all time and space, as readily as we observe the stars emit light in all directions throughout the universe, also permeating all time and space. We know this to be true because that is what the stars in fact do. They emit light in all directions. Therefore, their atoms at the smallest levels of energy are emitting a signal of energy in all directions. We are, in essence, observing the entire collective vibrational energy of the photons or particles of energy that complement stars. Thus, we are observing what the most fundamental parts of the universe do. I would encourage you that you write and rewrite this paragraph on a separate sheet of paper. I would also encourage you to read and reread this paragraph. And I would certainly encourage you to watch and rewatch the experiment being explained for more clarity on this concept. The point that everything in the universe, including everything in it, sends out a unique broadcast of frequency of vibration or energy must be stated plainly. This concept being continually comprehended is of utmost importance. Your material possessions at a quantum level transmit a frequency or vibration in all directions. Your body transmits a unique energy and frequency, and like the light of the sun that permeates all time and space, the transmission of your material possessions also permeate all time and space. This also proves that our own personal collective transmission also permeates all time and space. This is something that we should consider strongly. We must know it as a law of the universe, all the way to the quantum level in connection to matter. So putting these concepts together, as far as the observations from the double-slit experiment has explained, you and I exist in the same manner as particles do. We exist in a paradoxical state, particle-wave duality. We exist and operate in constant duality. We live and exist as a collection of particles defining time and space, or as a collective vibrational wave not relative to time and space. Just like the law of gravity is a constant, all individuals and everything else in the universe are constantly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, vibrating their collective frequency into all space and time. This may be confusing at first, but it has been plainly stated by expert scientists that this is true. The next scientific phenomena also reinforces that the concept that energy is permeating all time and space. Scientific concept number 3, quantum entanglement. Let's consider and plainly state what we said before. In essence, particles exist in duality. They are particles in time and space, but more importantly and significantly, they also exist as wave frequencies not relevant to space and time. It was described by the double-slit experiment that when particles of energy are not being observed or measured, they are in essence waves of energy not defined by time or space. They are waves of energy of infinite possibility. Why or how? Scientists to this day don't know. But the double-slit experiment demonstrated with very clear observable evidence that when the photon was shot toward the sheet of metal with 2 holes, it went through both holes on each side simultaneously and both holes individually at separate times. It went through the left slit and then the right slit and then both at the same time. The photon did all 3 actions in the same instant. How and why can one particle of energy do 3 things in the same moment in time? Again, there's no explanation demonstrated as to the mechanics, but since the experiment showed that the photon was able to do all 3 movements, going in through each hole individually and going in through each hole at the same time, demonstrates that particles are, in essence, anywhere, everywhere, and nowhere. The conclusion then proves that electrons are omnipresent, everywhere, at every instant in time and space. It also showed that they are only defined in time and space when chosen to be observed. Albert Einstein said that he didn't like the implications of quantum physics because he wanted to believe that the moon was still there even though he was not looking at it. They are particles of infinite possibility because they are defined in time and space when observed, but they are anywhere, nowhere, and everywhere at the same time when not observed. This gives way to quantum entanglement. This describes that particles, are in a symphony of immediate communication. It has been proven that a particle specifically defined in space and in time can affect another particle somewhere else or anywhere else in time and space in an instant, no matter the distance. They could be an inch away from each other, or they could be as far away as the other side of the galaxy, or trillions of light years away. This suggests that information seems to be able to travel instantaneously regardless of distance. And this is because one particle can be in one place and in an infinite amount of places at the same time. These particles of energy have been observed doing all kinds of things, from becoming invisible, from being in two places at the same time, and even traveling back in time and changing the past. This may sound bizarre, but the double-slit experiment does prove that at a quantum level, the particles behave as such. This also suggests that we may be living in a holographic universe and that a solid universe is only an illusion. Quote, "If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration." End quote, by Nikola Tesla. Scientific Principle 4. The uncertainty principle and quantum tunneling. The uncertainty principle, plainly stated, is this. Since particles of energy exist in a paradoxical duality, it is impossible to know exactly where a particle really is in time and space. This describes to us a strange paradox. We simply cannot know anything with absolute certainty. So because of the weight-like qualities of photons or particles of energy, they cannot be specifically located or pinpointed. Scientists can only say where the particle is most likely to be. Scientists are dealing in a paradox of just high and low probabilities of things existing maybe in space and time. The paradox is that things are visible with our eyes, felt with our touch, and completely defined in time and space. But at a quantum level, things are not really there. Interestingly enough, scientists have experimented with this concept. They have taken particles and boxed them in, but the particles always seem to manage to generate enough energy to escape or break out of the box before its position and speed have been determined. This is mind-blowing. How can that be possible? Quoting a documentary on the uncertainty principle, scientists explained that nature will not allow its fundamental elements to be boxed in. This makes quantum tunneling a reality. Quoting the documentary again, English physicist Clifford Johnson says, quote, "So because in the microscopic world particles will interact with an entire different set of rules, the uncertainty of the microscopic universe extends far beyond the location of particles. It applies to everything, including a particle's energy. This gives rise to an outstanding phenomenon called quantum tunneling." End quote. An example given in this documentary by Frank Kuttner explains, quote, "We all know that unless we give enough force to a moving object, let's say a ball hitting a wall, the ball will just bounce back. But if it is an electron against the wall and you do not throw it hard enough to go through the wall, it might go through anyway. We call that quantum tunneling." End quote. According to an explanation, the particle is able to borrow energy from the future to go through the wall. This is because the particle in waveform is not defined in time and space, and therefore it is in both places at the same time. It is behind the wall, but it was also already on the other side of the wall or barrier. It is on both sides of the wall at the same time, just like it was observed that a photon will go through both slits of the wall at the same time. These experiments and concepts may sound bizarre and unbelievable, and that is why it is strongly suggested to the reader to observe carefully the many illustrations readily available for a progressive comprehension. It has been known that the mind will gradually grasp concepts as long as this new knowledge is repeated through different time intervals. A question then has risen among many scientists. Since we are made of particles, then can our collective vibration be in two or an infinite number of places at once and go through barriers if we choose to do so? Well, I have certainly heard of a historical teacher walk on water in the middle of a storm. He also dried up a fig tree at his command. He also fed thousands with just a few pieces of fish and bread. What does the biblical record of the one known as Christ have anything to do with the ability of energy particles to behave as previously discussed through the double slit experiment? We will engage this question on another chapter. But let's move on to what your brain can do at a quantum physical level. Scientific concept number 5. Our brain is a transmitter and receiver of energy, frequency, or vibration. We have examined that everything in the universe is energy and vibrates or resonates or sends out frequencies simultaneously in all directions. We also learned that everything has its own unique rate of resonance or vibration based on its collective particle accumulation. We also suggested, therefore, that we resonate or vibrate energy or frequencies, and as such, send out a unique frequency in all directions, permeating all time and space. We also examined that all of these crazy scientific principles are proven to be true thanks to the double slit experiment, quantum entanglement, and quantum tunneling. These are the laws and rules of the crazy, mind-blowing world of quantum mechanics. It is almost a miracle in nature that we are able to learn and understand these concepts. Considering all these concepts, we can conclude that our brain also has its own unique blueprint, a unique collective vibrational energy frequency. Let's also observe the idea that through our brains we think, we feel, or emote. We see, we hear, we taste, we smell, we touch, and we move and operate. We live. We may have learned through science that since everything is energy, our brain just interprets inputs and outputs of vibrational energy. In essence, everything we experience is just electrical signals interpreted, translated, or decoded by our brain. It has been said by many reliable sources that thoughts are things. It has also been expressed by them that thoughts also become things. Let's consider the point that nowadays there exist incredibly powerful instruments that can measure the resonance of thoughts. So like all things in the universe, thoughts can be measured or pinpointed in different areas of the brain by picking up its frequencies. We can then conclude that thoughts are fundamentally things, and as such, they are like all things. They are also energy vibrating at different rates of frequency. We can also conclude that like photons, they are also in a state of duality. Thoughts exist in your brain, but like all things, in an infinite amount of places, just like photons. We can also conclude that like all particles that are entangled, affecting themselves and other particles simultaneously, then thoughts are also entangled and affect themselves and other thoughts. The next sentence is not only scientific, but also believed to be true by some of the wealthiest and most powerful people that exist and have ever existed. As stated before, everything that is written here encompasses science and spiritual knowledge. It is also validated by ultra successful people who happen to have what you want in one way or another. So consider the next statement very carefully. Your brain is a transmitter and receiver of energy, frequency, and vibration. And your brain transmission of energy or frequency is also picked up by other brains, and it affects physical matter. End quote. According to Kevin Trudeau in the audio, Your Wish is Your Command, it has also been explained through observation that our brain can generate or create and broadcast any frequency we decide. One of the best experiments ever done to prove this was done in Japan by a scientist named Masaru Emoto. If the reader has not watched the documentary, What the Bleep Do We Know?, I suggest you watch it after reading this entire chapter. In that documentary, it was explained that thoughts, in themselves, as well as written words, affect the physical and molecular structure of water. Tanks of water were placed with specific words. Also, different types of music were played for the water. In another experiment, people were told to think certain thoughts or send out prayers to the water. The nature of the words, music, or prayers were either that of a positive nature or a negative nature. After drawing samples of the water, these were examined under a microscope, and it was found that once the water was frozen, the crystallization and molecular structure of the water changed. The positive outputs of energy made the crystals form beautifully, while the negative outputs of vibration made the water crystals jag and deform. Here's the money question. Does this mean that our brain, or us as individual conscious beings, can not only influence but create physical matter or photons? Does this mean that we can influence and create and expand the perceivable physical universe? I am personally inclined to say yes due to empirical evidence, although they are just theories. But I am more inclined to say yes because some of the most powerful people in the world that have ever existed testify and witness to the validity of the power that we hold. They include Thomas Edison, Albert Einstein, Andrew Carnegie, Napoleon Hill, and Nikola Tesla, among many more. These previous statements will continue to be validated throughout the book with other viable sources of spiritual and scientific knowledge, which may be quoted directly or indirectly. This includes people who, although not scientists, do have real-life evidence and testify that this information is true. Maybe if you really think about it, they are scientists as they took this information and developed a question in the form of a desired result in their personal lives. People have formed hypotheses based on desires or goals, tested these hypotheses through experimentation and drawing conclusions, and got powerful real-life evidence. This is important because experiments have to be able to be replicated. Therefore, we can say success and results based on conclusive evidence can be and must be replicated. Therefore, success, whatever you decide that to be in the observable universe and your own personal reality, is attainable scientifically. We can have what they have by doing what they did. We are coming to understand common denominators of success in connection to common denominators of action and reaction, for it is all based on laws of physics, specifically particle physics. Essentially, we can have, be, and do everything we want, plain and simple, scientifically. The next scientific principle is mostly validated by spiritual references and beliefs of people who testify to its existence, but it also has scientific evidence. Scientific concept number 6, laws of magnetic attraction, friction, and string theory. Through the study of particle physics, quantum physics has been able to reveal that there are laws that govern the universe and everything in it. In essence, the previous 5 concepts we have considered are all based on physical laws that are in effect just like the law of gravity. They are all constants that are in effect every moment of time and encompass all matter. Certainly, rules seem to apply differently or change once we decide to either measure or observe either the macroscopic universe or the microscopic universe of particle physics. So what is string theory? Scientists are still debating it, and many times when we try to understand what they are saying, it can be confusing. They also acknowledge it could be wrong and that they could hit a wall and toss the theory. They do explain that it is based on viable mathematical equations. Thankfully though, many of them do try their best to give us illustrations on how these concepts work. The implications of string theory can be lengthy and complicated, so the material here will only focus on one aspect of the entire idea that is relevant to what is being conveyed, success in our personal lives. Not that everything else as it is explained in string theory is not relevant to the nature of our universe. What we want to make clear is that we only need to understand how the steering wheel works, how the gas pedal works, how the brake pedal works, and how the auto transmission works, as well as how to put gas in your car. We must only learn the basics to help ourselves learn how to drive and get from point A to point B. Everything else is just details. If we were to go into greater detail of how the engine, the carburetor, the pistons, the internal electrical circuits work, how it was put together, etc., then we may start to believe that we can learn to drive and apply these principles practically in your personal life. So as of now, we are helping ourselves to just understand enough of how our individuality works with the physical universe and how we can create what we desire in our personal lives. Going back to string theory and the laws of magnetism, the concept of string theory has been explained by renowned scientists as, quote, a weird idea. But you will notice that it is as simple and obvious as the law of gravity and as pervasive as the air we breathe. In a Nova documentary, scientist Brian Greene explains that the basis for string theory is that particles are in a constant form of communication, like two baseball players throwing a baseball back and forth. In this instant, the two players symbolize particles of energy in constant duality. The ball that is being thrown back and forth here represents a particle of force. An example given is electromagnetism. Some forces are incredibly more powerful than others. We can illustrate this by examining birds or an airplane. How is it that these things are able to defy the law of gravity? Obviously, it is because much more powerful forces or laws are at work. These forces encompass the particles of a bird weighing just a few ounces or an airplane weighing tons. Certainly, the law of gravity does not go away, but it is just superseded by a much stronger force, the law of lift. Think of a baby as he learns to lift himself up and defy the law of gravity as he grows to be a toddler. The baby, seemingly with ease, will learn to turn, then sit up, crawl, and then walk. Where's the law of gravity keeping this little person tied to the floor as it did the first few months? Also, think of a weightlifter bench pressing 200 pounds to exercise his body. We can see that they're all defying the law of gravity and applying much stronger forces. String theory explains that the more of these messenger particles or photons are exchanged between the two baseball players or particles, the stronger the magnetic attraction between particles. Scientists predicted that it is this exchange of messenger particles, photons, between particles that create what we feel as force. Experiments confirm these predictions with the discovery of these messenger particles for electromagnetism, the strong force, and the weak force, end quote, by Brian Greene. This gives ample circumstantial evidence proving that particles attract powerfully when they communicate and are drawn to each other the more they are alike and communicate. This is the law of magnetic attraction. Similar frequencies of vibration or energy will attract because they are powerfully magnetized to each other. The opposite is true, for a particle's magnetic force can repel powerfully. This is also suggested by the Big Bang theory. Considering that scientists are still hoping to observe the Big Bang, or another way of saying it is that we have no clue as to what happened at such point, which they call singularity. Scientists have explained that sometime after the explosion of the singularity, the universe kept expanding outwardly and thus cooled off. A singularity has been defined as the point in space and time where all energy that complements the universe, including all its physical laws, were concentrated and focused into a single point smaller than an atom. When the Big Bang occurred, particles began to lose energy and became more defined in time and space. At one point, particles of hydrogen were produced in mass quantities, with one electron revolving around one proton. It is the most basic composition of energy in our visible universe. This is known because the mass of all stars is made up of hydrogen, and stars are massive in comparison to our little planet Earth. So hydrogen attracts itself. Water also attracts itself. As we consider and think of water, we have learned that it is also one of the most basic known molecules in our known world. Water's polarity or magnetism is really strong. We can observe this when we take spilled water and see it move closer to other drops of water on a flat surface. Or think about this. We have always wondered why when we have a full bladder and we are running water in a sink, we feel this strong urge to pee. Why is that? It is because of the strong magnetic force or polarity of the water molecules. They are drawn to each other. Like attracts like. In essence, there is an invisible force affecting your bladder. Of course, I'm just being facetious, but it's still true. So to simplify this concept, frequencies of energy that are alike in nature are drawn to each other. Whatever frequencies are being put out, those same frequencies are being drawn to themselves. This has been explained before by many as a very basic idea, such as you reap what you sow. What comes around goes around. What you put out comes back to you. And there is more happiness in giving than receiving, among others. So tying it all together, the 4 principles of science. So to emphasize, the known visible universe of particles are described and governed by the following foundational principles. Principle 1. Everything is energy, frequency, or vibration. Everything in the known universe is a collection of energy vibrating at different frequencies, and each thing is collectively and individually putting out its own unique and distinct frequency. This is also true at every level of possible known observation, from the macrocosmic observation to the microcosmic observation of the known universe. Principle 2. Everything in the universe exists in a state of duality, also known as particle wave duality. It is one of the basics of quantum physics. Energy exists as both particles with particle-like qualities defining time and space, as well as wave-like frequencies with wave-like properties not defining time and space. Thus, the conclusion is also that we as people and human beings also live in a state of vibrational duality. It is also explained that it is the observer that collapses the wave function of the particle, thus establishing the particle precisely in what seems to be a place in time and space. All this was explained by the double-slit experiment, quantum entanglement, the uncertainty principle, and quantum tunneling. Principle 3. Since we also live in a state of particle wave duality, our brain also exists in a state of particle wave duality. Then it is conclusive that our brains transmit and receive energy, frequency, and vibration based on our command. Our transmission of energy is also picked up by other brains. Also, our brain's transmission of frequency affects physical matter. Simply put, we can create a transmission for what already exists, and we can create a frequency based on what has not come into existence. The previous statements will continue to be developed throughout. Principle 4. Everything in the universe is governed by magnetic forces of attraction. Just like the law of gravity says, what goes up must come down, as it is always a constant. Also, the law of magnetic attraction says that frequencies or vibrations that are alike or in communication attract and pull each other. Similar or same energy is attracted to itself. This is what string theory is based upon. Before moving on, it is encouraged that the reader review this chapter so these concepts may align better with your understanding. A special phenomena will occur as we read, study, and think about concepts repeatedly on a regular basis. Neural pathways formed based on these concepts will be firmly established in our brains and progressively become more ingrained, which will enforce the benefit of our comprehension of the material. Thus, the previous laws of physics and principles that we just discussed will be made active and seemingly take on a life of their own. These laws will begin to permeate those neural pathways, and as such phenomena happens, we must begin to understand and acquire knowledge that will begin to validate what we have been discussing all along. You will absolutely begin to acquire more discoveries, cognitions, and realizations that will unfold the unfathomable power that we personally have. But let's ask some questions. How did people discern these basic truths in the past, since it is only now that we're able to explain them scientifically? What did they hear? Who spoke and how did they listen? When have these things taken place? Why were they able to understand or comprehend and accomplish what seems to be impossible, even with today's technology? How were nations of the past aware of such laws of the universe or principles of life, for they are one and the same with present spiritual beliefs? Is this evidence of the existence of known civilizations that seem much more advanced than what others have made us to believe? If so, are we truly more advanced? Or did we just fall from what maybe is just supposed to be basic knowledge, like 1 + 1 = 2, or ABC? But before we examine such questions, let's see how and why something that has been considered to be, by some in the scientific community and others as myth, superstition, stubbornness, foolishness, or plain useless nonsense is essentially of great value. Let's examine now through the foundation we have established that the lenses known as science and empirical evidence, as well as spirituality and certain stories which have been considered as pure myth or impossibilities, are strongly rational and have basis in reality.